Hey everyone, today we're going to look at what you should put into a PC build if you plan on becoming a game developer. This is a really weird build as it really depends on what your job is as a developer. If you're an artist, an engineer, a designer, or a producer, your needs vary wildly. What I'm going to do is I'll tackle our build today as though you're looking at being an artist or designer, and really you'll be working inside of the game engine a lot of the time. So let's dig into it. All right, so what's first? Well, what's the first thing you want to buy? What's the first thing that you need to get? For the last couple of years here, it's been near impossible to get your hands on a lot of different components for PCs. But let's make a choice here and now. Let's choose the video card. So, right out of the gate, you've got to pick. Are you team green or are you team red? Maybe there's somebody in the background and they're screaming, but what about Team Blue? Team Blue didn't really show up. They're a year behind the curve. Now, what am I talking about? Team Red, Team Green, Team Blue. Team Red is AMD, Team Green is NVIDIA, and Team Blue is Intel. Now, Team Red has a lot of very solid offerings. They got lots of RAM and lots of power, but, and it's a pretty big but, they're not known for having great ray tracing power. That might not seem like a big deal for a lot of gaming applications, but Team Green has a lot of support inside of apps like Blender and engines like Unreal. As a developer, we can't really overlook anything that gives us a competitive edge. Now, for myself personally, I've come down on the side of Team Green or NVIDIA. Not because I really love them and not because I really love their products, but because their products remove roadblocks for me as a developer right now. Okay, so let's say now we've picked a team. Well, which video cards are you going to buy? 6 months ago, I would have said, you take whatever you can get your hands on. Whatever your budget is, just grab that. But a lot has changed, and even in the last week, the last couple of days, now you can pretty much have access to anything you want. I would say act fast. The rumor mill that's circulating right now says that the RTX 40 series is launching, any day now. They're trying to burn through their backlog or their, stock of the RTX 30 series right now. What does that mean? Well, it means that, you can shave hundreds of dollars off of pretty much all their cards compared to last year's pricing. Up here in the wilds of Canada in Canadian dollars, what was, regularly seen going for $1,500, $1,600, the RTX 3080 cards, you can now get them $800 to $1,000 on the high side. RTX 3060s are now trading at around $400 Canadian, and when I was trying to get one, they were over $900. So there's a lot of change there. Now, needless to say, if you're willing to jump on this generation of card and hold on to it for a few years, you will get an absolute steal. Okay. However, the next gen cards are rumored to be super, super powerful, but they are going to be super power hungry. That type of investment means that you'll probably end up having to upgrade other parts as well. So just, weigh your pros and weigh your cons. Okay, now, which one do I get? Why should I get one? Why should I get the other? Should I get the cheap one? Should I get the expensive one? Get the one that you yourself can afford. It's all about comfort levels. I bought an RTX 3060 because I was buying in the middle of the insanity, and it was all I could get my hands on with a reasonable amount of money. The other reason I bought it was because, as opposed to a 3070, it had 12 gigs of RAM. So it has enough for me because I deal in heavy RAM applications. So I wasn't ditching out almost $3,000 for a secondary market RTX 3090. Right now, I'm looking to get a 3080 because prices have really leveled out. Now, if you are like, no, don't like NVIDIA's, I only like Team Red. I want to be different. You will cut off some of the features that you get from Team Green. Now, in any event, what I would recommend to any developer is get the most VRAM possible. I know a lot of Team Red stuff, you can get, I think, up to like 16 or 24 gigs of VRAM. Grab one of those. All right, so you've settled on your graphics card, and now you have another hard decision to make. And again, it's another Team Red versus Team Blue decision. AMD or Intel, Ryzen versus Core, lots of threads versus high core clocks. What is your specific workload? Are the apps that you're using able to take advantage of a lot of cores? Some are not. Some older programs are single core, single thread usage. If you need that brute force, high throughput, single core speed, you might be stuck, with Intel. As for me, I ended up making my choice to come and grab a Ryzen 9 and build an AM4 system. I did this for a lot of reasons. I needed a lot of cores and a lot of threads because I do a lot of multitasking and a lot of multi-threaded applications. Not only do I play games, but I make them, I stream, I record, I do lots of different things. And with my Ryzen 9, I can do all of them at the same time, and the price was exceptional. Now, if you want to be on Team Blue, the i9 is also a great choice for this. I went for Team Red just because of cost to performance. Now, you don't have to have these epic tier processors either. A Ryzen 7 or a Ryzen 5 are also great options. The same with the Core i5 and Core 7 from Intel. The money that you save now could be time wasted later, though. So watch what your needs are and buy accordingly. If you're worried about the cost of your build, if you have clients, you can pass the cost of this build on to yourself or your clients. The lower your core counts and the lower the clock speeds, it's just going to make things take longer for not only you, but the client. So balance your budget with a cost analysis. And you do the work faster and get a higher hourly wage because you're building per job. Who knows? All right, once you've made a processor decision, up next, grab a motherboard. Definitely don't cheap out though. Motherboards are the backbone of what holds everything together. A great motherboard is going to have a lot of useful features, a lot of useful I/O, inputs and outputs, USB ports, a really fast Ethernet connection, maybe you want Wi-Fi, good audio chipsets, and most importantly, a very usable BIOS. Now, BIOSes are a little bit of a software system that will allow you to tweak your system's features. If you buy a cheap enough board, you don't get access to all the cool bells and whistles. So if you do cheap out on this, then you've wasted a lot of money buying your great video card or your CPU, because if the motherboard's too cheap or too old, then it won't support those newer features that you're going to want. Now, I'm in the Team Red camp, and there are millions of options. Up until now, their processors have been able to use the same older AM4 motherboard architecture. Intel tends to change up their die and their design fairly regularly. This requires users to ditch their motherboards every couple of generations. So in so doing, I found a great motherboard at a reasonable price. This is the upshot of Team Red and the AM4 is lots of ample supply, lower prices. Now Team Blue has a lot of really great options for motherboards as well, so don't fret if you're an Intel fan. There is a lot to be had. Now, before we go any further with this, I will say Intel's latest generation with their latest generation of motherboards is currently kind of generationally ahead of AMD until later on this year when they drop their new architecture, the AM5. Okay, now we've got a graphics card. We've got our processor picked. We've got our motherboard picked. What about RAM? Okay, memory. How much memory should I have as a developer? How fast should the memory be? The answer for this question is always more. More RAMs, more speeds, more fasts. We are at this transitional period right now for RAM. We're on the cusp of the acceptance of DDR5 as the standard. We're starting to leave DDR4 behind. Now, there's no such thing as a future-proof PC, but if I had to build something immediately right now today, I'd probably grab the latest Core i9 and Intel motherboard, purely because they already support DDR5, whereas Team Red doesn't have a ton of DDR5 support yet. DDR5 is going to absolutely bury DDR4. And that said, if you're building something for the next 2 to 3 years of game dev, what I'd do right now is just buy 64 gigs of really fast DDR4 and you'll be fine. I know a lot of gamers are like, 8 gigs is more than enough. That's cute, gamer person, but for simulations and real heavy-duty workloads, I myself have a 64 gig kit in my workstation, and I wish I had another 64 gigs. I wish I had 128 gigs, because things do get heavy, and I do still run out of memory. It doesn't happen every day, but it does still happen. Now, what if you want RGB RAM and little fans and all that sort of stuff? It's not important, right? Just try and get the highest clock speed and as much RAM as will fit in your motherboard. Taking us back to motherboards, make sure that motherboard has at least 4 RAM slots on it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with memory is don't just buy a single 16 gig or 32 gig stick of RAM. Whatever you're getting, get at least 2 sticks of the stuff. RAM works best in dual channel mode. Okay, take advantage of all the throughput in your system. All right, now I'm just going to take a little break from the middle of our video here to say, if you're enjoying this guide so far, if it's at all helpful, please hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos for devs and game creation, hit the subscribe button. And a share really helps out for the channel. We're growing. Please help. All right, now back to our guide. All right, how about storage? Not hard drives, but storage, SSDs. Those crappy mechanical drives, nobody wants those anymore. I want more speeds. When you're speccing out a motherboard, make sure that you get at least one. 2 or more would be awesome, but at least 1 slot for M.2 SSDs. The faster the generation, the better, right? So we're at Gen 4 now, so if you can get a Gen 4 motherboard for M.2, that would be awesome. Whatever the fastest current standard is. Right now, I'm running 2 single terabyte M.2 NVMe SSDs, and they have a lot of RAM cache on them. I bought them based on they have longer lifetimes and better read-write speeds. If you're looking, Samsung is kind of one of the best names for SSDs when you're looking. Reason I say this is because these drives, again, come down to speed, right? They're going to speed up your boot process. They're going to speed up your programs. I wouldn't use them for storing pictures and videos and things like that, but they are great for programs. Okay, I have a confession though. I do have some crappy mechanical drives. I have large redundant mechanical storage to back up things. Photos, videos, old 3D work. They all go on a couple of 4 terabyte drives that are set up to handle that sort of thing. Now, here's another note. Physical drives inside of your machine are important, but please always make use of OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever it is. Make sure that you have a cloud redundancy. It's super important. Last note here, SATA is mostly dead. SATA hard drives are not as cheap as the mechanical, and now they're no longer as fast as the M.2, so they're kind of in that weird spot. They're not cheap enough to make them viable right now. All right, that's enough about storage. Let's talk power supply. Now, power supplies are not sexy, and they're not the big item that everybody wants. They're easier to come by, but get a big one. And I don't mean physically large. I mean get a huge power supply and get it from Seasonic. I'm not a big enough person to be sponsored by anybody, but Seasonic does make killer power supplies. I had a crappy old Thermaltake power supply, and it would trip, all the time. It didn't die, but it would trip with my lower spec system, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So I just went out and grabbed the biggest, beefiest Seasonic that I could get my hands on, If you're building right now, don't build with anything less than 1,000 watts power supply. I know it sounds weird, but don't. Future-proof a little bit. You also don't need to get a modular power supply that, you know, lets you custom everything. However, I went with modular because I hate clutter and I hate wires. Modular power supplies allow you to just get rid of all the crap you don't want and need and just plug in the stuff that you do need. The other thing is, with a big power supply and minimal wires, you've got a upgrade route, right? That is, unless NVIDIA goes as off the rails with the 40 series as it sounds like they might. All right, at this point, we're just like, you know, we've got power supplies, we've got storage, we've got all that stuff. What's next? Well, what's next is cooling. Now, do you go air? Do you go liquid? It's really a personal preference. I went with air-cooled because I don't like downtime. I don't like the thought of leaks. I don't like the thought of, you know, liquid hitting my system at any point. I know it's unreasonable. I know that there are great AIO or all-in-one coolers that are off the shelf. They got awesome performance, great price, solid warranty. That said, you know, if you want to air cool, there's a lot of really great air cool towers out there for reasonable prices. Now, most of these, if you're wondering, are just for cooling the CPU. Your GPU tends to have cooling built in. It'll have a bunch of fans and it'll have, you know, thermal pads and all that sort of stuff built in. Some GPUs will have water blocks built in if you want water cooling. But I'll tell you a dirty little secret as a game dev. Game devs don't really tend to lean on overclocking for our PCs, for our builds. I know it's scandalous, but the reason being is that a game developer's PC is very expensive, it's top tier, and it has to be very reliable, ridiculously reliable. Crashes that cost data and time are unacceptable. So if we want something faster, we just buy a bigger, better, more awesome, newer part. Aftermarket overclocks tend to increase heat and decrease stability. So if you're a dev, you do not want blue screens, you do not want lockups, you do not want crashes. So we don't really need crazy cooling. All right, now you're probably like, oh, but I want to buy a boatload of 120 mil case fans, and you know they've got to have addressable RGB and all the colors. Can I interest you in something a bit more brown? Noctua is pretty much the best cooling fan company in the world. They don't generally offer anything with lighting or RGB, and they used to only come in this really ugly brown. They have reluctantly started offering things that are gray or black now, much to the happiness of everybody with eyeballs and taste. The brown is neat, but it's not great. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of parts now. Where are we going to put these? Well, generally you put them in a case. What kind of case? Well, this is where you got to figure out, you know, are all your parts going to fit in this case? You generally need a decent sized case to hold all this stuff. So you need something that's at least ATX, you know, mid-tower size. You're going to want to find something that's going to fit that chungus of a graphics card, a big old air cooler. I myself went with a Corsair 4000D right before the Airflow one came out, much to my, you know, sadness. But I just pulled off the front panel of my case. It's all good. Now, it doesn't have to be Corsair. You know, Lian Li, tons of other brands make great cases that have great airflow. The most important thing is try and find a case that does have decent airflow in the design. Lots of mesh, top venting, front venting, bottom venting, wherever you can. If you're unsure at any point about any of these parts, or if something's going to work with something else, use the website PC Part Picker. It's fantastic. You can literally just plunk a parts list in and it will actually outline any potential conflicts. It'll tell you, oh, this thing doesn't have a USB-C header, or this thing over here, the tower cooler is not going to fit in that case. That's really useful if it's your first build. As for any other little gotchas, you might want to get some Arctic Silver thermal paste for your CPU. Uh, Generally, when you buy tower coolers, they come with thermal paste, but it's not great, right? Unless you're getting a really good tower cooler, it comes with really good thermal paste. Get rid of it and get some good stuff. Okay, now you have a system. You have it all, it's built, it's in a case. What else do you need to start? Well, you need peripherals. You need a decent mechanical keyboard. That said, if you are somebody like me that records stuff or streams stuff, get one with really quiet mechanical switches. Mine are hella clicky, and that's a real pain in the butt. Also, get yourself a gaming mouse with remappable keys. Now, I know we're not gaming necessarily, but the real reason for this is if you've got extra remappable keys, you can assign macros to your mouse that will shave off seconds per operation, which ends up saving hours per week, which could save days of work per year. I know it's pretty small, but over the course of my annual year, my mouse pays for itself many, many times over. And then finally, you got mouse, keyboard, you got computer. Where do you display it? Well, you need a monitor. Now, if you can, get the most chungus monitor you can afford, right? That's what I say about every part. Right now, I'm currently running 3 27-inch panels, one over there, and one right here. I'd much prefer like one ultra-wide panel with no bezels and stuff, but budget constraints, right? I could only afford, a few $100s here, a few $100s there to get all these panels. If you can't go for the crazy big, ultra-wide 40-something inch Samsung or whatever, at least just get yourself a decent 27-inch panel or 2 panels if you can. Something with 2K resolution at least, and a decent refresh rate, something like 144 hertz. The reason for that is because easier on your eyes, and the better your panel, the more representative it's going to be of the final product. You want something with good color space. There's a reason why Apple charges like $5,000 for its, developer display. It's color calibrated. It's doing all of the things to give you the best possible experience. Now, if you're not too worried about that, just having a second screen or an ultra wide does help with productivity. It might, allow you to pull up extra software. Maybe it just has a YouTube window there so that you can blow off steam and, unwind a little bit. Speaking of additional screens and peripherals, what if you are an artist or a designer and you need a drawing tablet or screen? Now, I have a confession to make. I used to love Wacom, but now I despise them. I do not like them at all. The reason is too many broken parts, too many broken pens and Intuos Pros, and then finally a broken Cintiq. That was kind of the one that broke the camel's back. I've since switched over to using XP Pen, and I have never looked back. Now, I've heard great things about Huion. Like I said, I've never used them, but I've used XP Pen, and they have fantastic pens and tablets. And I'm currently looking into picking up one of their drawing displays soon. Not only can these serve a purpose for your sculpting and painting and increase those, but it also helps to extend your desktop if you get the display, right? It's just another monitor. Now, you have all this stuff, you've purchased it, and it is time for assembly. If you don't want to build, you don't want to build it yourself, you can buy a pre-built, but don't buy from Dell or any of the other big OEMs. There's a reason for that. They do shady stuff. They make weird shaped power supplies and funky shaped motherboards. But why? Why would they do such a thing? Why? To make sure you can never upgrade it without buying stuff directly from them. If you want a decent, properly built PC, use a smaller builder like NZXT or Origin PC, etc., etc. There's probably a builder in your area. Now, if you're a game dev and you're on the go a lot, you find yourself on an airplane or a bus or some form of transit, find comparable specs inside of a laptop. It won't be quite as fast, but that's not too bad. The only real negative to a laptop is they are terrible for upgrade paths. A lot of the times the CPU might be soldered, or the RAM, they might only have 2 RAM slots, but they are powerful and they are very portable. All right, gang, this has been an epic ramble of a video. It has taken us on a journey, but please know that no matter your budget or your experience, if you've got a 5-year-old laptop and a dream, you can make a game. Now, I know that this is a video about building some badass AAA game dev machine, but it's also a video for being realistic and just getting it out there and making something. Your idea or your IP will sell the game, not your system. And building a banger of a PC just gives you the shiniest hammer. Don't think that your shabby hammer can't make a video game. It just might take a little bit more effort on your part. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along today. I hope that you take something away from this and that it helps in your decision-making process. And until next time, happy gaming, everybody.